All right, no timer today, no intro because I'm late. I'm late. I'm sorry I'm late. I know you guys got busy schedules. I'm not trying to be like, oh, now you got to wait for me. But I've been working on some stuff today and it took more time than I thought. So here we are. Welcome to Underdog Theology, the podcast that's no longer a podcast that talks about stuff that no one else talks about, but they do. That is kind of like the theme today. It is a lot of people who just they talk about this stuff behind closed doors. We all know, but then they act like no one can talk about it online, and then they act like we're the weird ones for being like, "Hey, can we have some information, please, about this guy that was like shoved down our throats within evangelicalism for years, and then like had huge issues, and we just don't even know what those issues are, but now we kind of do, but do we?" And also, then these people get mad at us for being like, you jump to conclusions. Like that's kind of how I feel today. Is there's a guy who is friends with Steve Lawson who wrote an article that is very much pointed at us and at Julie Roys and at like the whole evangelical culture for being like, you guys are just like gossips. That's the vibe that I get from this article. That you guys are just gossips, and here I am to set the record straight. And he didn't. But there's questions that I have throughout this. Like, it's a very perplexing thing. Like, if you've been watching the channel for this kind of stuff over the last couple months, since September, I think, is when everything went down. Like we've gotten like almost no information, and it's taken forever to get any of the little information that we have. And now we get an article that's supposedly like, all right, let's just deal with the elephant in the room, and that is this title. All right, if you want to get on me and YouTubers and people who write articles and anyone who publishes anything for clickbaity stuff, could you please be consistent and talk about the clickbaity nature of this? Steve Lawson interview. It's not an interview. It's a post about a friend of his that he might interview in the future and was going to until other people wrecked it. These investigative reporters, they wrecked it. Like, all right, we're going to read the article, but I just want to point that out right off the bat. Like, I have very conflicted feelings about this. There's parts of this that I go, okay, maybe, we could see a little bit of the humanity of Steve Lawson. I think a little bit in this. All right. Don't jump to conclusions and where I'm going with that. All right. But I think that there is some of the humanity going on there. But then there's also like a lot of issues that I still have with this thing. Now, I want to say hi to some people first because this is my show. And if you are tuning in, 64 people watching live, hit the like button and also, chill a little bit with the get to the point stuff. Like if I wanted to make a 7-minute video that would get out to everywhere, I would make that video. But I'm not here to do that. I'm here to hang out with my friends online and talk about these things in the way that we should be able to talk about it without people going like, oh, you're a gossip or whatever. All right, let's see who's in the chat. Sound off in the chat. Who's here? I'm not going to say where. Type your location in the chat. That's a lot of streamers say that, and it's always creepy to me. It's like, where are you sitting right now? Type that in the chat. Like what? Why do you need to know that? All right, Mule Rider says he hasn't started yet, has he? Also, did you guys see Vody is going to end up moving to Florida to team up with Founders Ministry? Saw that coming a mile away. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of thought that maybe he would go back to Texas, maybe even go back on staff at the same church that he was when he got, known. I thought maybe Idaho, but that weird game that he was playing of just like, guess the state. Sorry to all these people. There was an opportunity, but like you don't even say what the opportunity was. So like, why are you doing this? Like, it's the weirdest game show ever created. Vody Bakum on where his family was going to move. Like, think about how weird that is. Like a celebrity being like, I'm going to move to California, maybe. Oh, the Zoom took way too long. Also, I don't like Zooms that are, why do I have transitions on? Let me go into the settings real quick. I think I could do that quick. I don't know if I can. Let's go. Check in. Show animated, show camera, this is probably not gonna. This is gonna take a long time. Is it? Fade out when finished. I don't want to do that. Default transition. No transition. All right. Now we can have fun. Now we can do this. What? All right. Nobody cares. All right. So yeah, weird. I thought about actually doing this stream until the other day. I was going to do this stream on founders and figuring out like their whole seminary, why they're starting a seminary, who is this for, all that stuff. Maybe next week we'll do that, or maybe later on in the week. We'll see how the week goes. But yeah, very interesting stuff. But not that interesting, you know what I mean? All right. What's up, Heidi? How about those Chiefs? LOL. I exam and went grocery shopping this morning, and it's all anyone wanted to talk about. The Chiefs. Yeah. I can see why they're excited. Everyone's excited. Also, remember to keep things civil. No name calling in the chat unless you're a beep. I'm just kidding. Bite. Oh man, that sounded like really bad. I was just. All right, moving on. That joke did not land. I wasn't meaning. All right, moving on. Hello, everyone. Drop a like on the way in. What's up, Scary Mo? I think Vody has been encouraged to distance himself from Moscow. No, guys. Another thing. Supposed ongoing viewer, vice president of G3, Virgil Walker, who might be. Is he already in the chat? I don't know. He was in the chat the other day and a while back. He's speaking at what's it, ReformCon? Or is it RefCon? Probably not RefCon. RefCon is probably like Super Bowl stuff, like getting ready to, make sure that the Eagles win. So it's not just like a dynasty and everyone can remember Tom Brady as being like the best dynasty. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. That's probably a different thing. But ReformCon, Virgil Walker is speaking on stage with Doug Wilson, like, and all the guys, like mostly it seems like it is very much like Moscow people, and Virgil Walker from G3 is going to be there. So guys, again, it's turning out a little bit differently than I thought it was going to be, but nobody cares about it anymore because now they found their new enemy, which is Joel Webbin, and they're distancing themselves from like that shade of like Christian nationalist stuff. And I think that in about a year, you're going to see that none of these guys care anymore. Like Doug Wilson isn't radioactive. It's just going to be like, that's normal. And I think it's pretty damning for them on who they're willing to associate with for the sake of their audience. But also I just think, a lot of people are just not going to care anymore. Like bigger fish to fry kind of thing of like, all right, let's make sure we don't have the guys doing the weirdo salute, if you know what I mean. Let's get rid of those guys. But that guy in Moscow, whatever, not a big deal anymore. And I'm hoping, that with new president of Gospel Coalition, that maybe some things can change there and they can get some momentum going finally. And maybe things will be a little bit different, but I don't think that we're going to be caring all that much about like distancing from Idaho. You're going to see probably Doug Wilson's going to speak at Founders Seminary, do some courses on wittiness or whatever they think he's an expert on. All right. We got Skeletal Remains. We got Joseph Bacata. What's up, dude? Hey guys, I just made it in just in time. What's up, Mrs. Creel? Hope you're doing well. We got the Claymore. Giving the Claymore. Dude, are you excited for Saturday? I'm so excited for Saturday, man. I can't even. Don't get me going. I already did it to myself, but don't get me going on Royal Rumble, man. I'm so excited for Saturday. It's gonna be a great time in my house. I'm gonna be glued to that thing. Don't expect to see a live stream on Saturday night, folks. All right. Skeletal remains. I read the article. I'm gobsmacked they used that for the headline. It borders on / is a sin of lying. I mean, I think it's clickbait. I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's lying, because it's not flat out saying this is a Steve Lawson interview, but it's pretty close to that. Hey guys, just got here. Bob the Baptist with the cutest video on the internet this morning. All right, I haven't commented yet because I was watching it while I was doing other things. But if you want to watch a super cute video, don't click out of here. But after the stream, go check out Bob the Baptist teaching his daughter, discipling his daughter. It is one of the cutest things I've seen in a long time. David says, always good to see you. Always good to see you in the chat, my friend. Mule Rider at Dean, very important question. Will Scott make a comeback in the near future? I don't know, man. Like, do the Christian nationalists have a strong stance on ska? Like, they're not cool enough, right? Like, I'll show my cards. Ska's rad. If it made a comeback, I'd be all over that. Are you kidding me? I love ska. But I know someone who has. Okay. As soon as I saw this news, I thought, can't wait for Dean to cover this. Yep, I guess that's what I'm known for now. What's up, Hugo? Sup? Not much. We got David. We've got Carol Ann. This stuff wouldn't affect us so much if we weren't so dependent on these guys. Our heart is the temple of the Holy Spirit. We must take pastors off pedestals. Wise words. Yeah, I think we're at that point. A lot of these guys that were lifted up to be on stages don't deserve it. I'll say that. Like, it's not to say that there aren't faithful pastors who should have those spots, but I'm saying the guys that have had those spots aren't nearly the guys that we thought they were. Like, they keep on proving that over and over and over again. So for me, it used to be like, oh, they must have written some great stuff or preached great sermons, led a lot of people to the Lord. So now they're a trusted source of counsel and advice and could get like credibility. I thought they would have credibility. But the more I've learned about some of these guys and what they've shown, I'm specifically talking about like the Young Restless Reform stuff and what came out of it. They don't really deserve it. Mark Driscoll never deserved that platform that he got, right? Steve Lawson, well, I don't know. I'll let you be the judge after we read this thing. Do you respect anyone, ever? Well, no. Oh, did I hurt your feelings with talking about the guy who who committed adultery and saying like that's bad? Oh no. What is that? Carol, Tom, like, you guys realize there's probably about like, I don't know, maybe 20 guys that we've talked about for the last year. Like, that's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket of like who is out there in evangelicalism, and more importantly, not just like on like the public sphere, but I'm talking about like average normal pastors, people who believe in Jesus and follow after him. 20 to 40 guys is a pretty small group. So if you're like, oh, he hates them all, like, no, it's just a lot of the ones that are most popular because of scandal, because of controversy, because of stirring up division, right? Like the loudest voice wins the day on the internet. So we're going to talk about those guys. And usually when they're super loud, it's because they don't really have strong arguments behind them or don't have the character to rely on. So, I mean, take that for what you will. If it's all your guys that are like, also just saying grace alone, take a look in the mirror a little bit, like not you personally, but like if if there are a bunch of people online who are constantly having issues with a group of people, like, I think it's not a good thing to just be like, oh, they just hate everybody. Like, maybe that's true. But also just like ask yourself, why? Why would they be so against these people or that person? Like, what is that? And like, maybe just listen a little bit, you know? Like, we could all hear each other out. I did find that weird about Virgil Walker, especially after the public fight with Strand and Moscow. I don't understand it at all. Like, the whole weird, like, playing footsie between G3 and Moscow, and the tree fort stuff, which those guys apparently do not care about. Like, I've gotten that from them. Like, they do not care that everyone knows that they pay Moscow every single month thousands of dollars for their G3 plus ministries. They don't care. They don't take that seriously. So, like, I don't understand it. They made it very public a couple of years ago that they weren't going to do stuff, and then they keep on doing stuff, and it's just like, I don't get it. I don't know. Do we really need more seminaries? Someone needs to start a Christian community college. Oh, that would be great, man. Who's Scott? Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, the 90s, man. It was a good time. I honestly would be surprised if Doug taught at Founders Seminary, but who knows? I'm not saying like, well, maybe like a little lecture kind of little series of a couple weeks, you know? That's if attendance really dips, you know. That's how they can get everyone back. Hi, Dean. What's up, Pam? Interested to discuss this with you all today. Dylan and I were talking about Lawson yesterday, and I may have ranted just a tad. Well, feel free to rant in the comment section. Paul says, read the article. Steve Lawson possibly going into secular employment should be a reality show. Ooh. Survey says... Carol says, got it. Thank you for telling me what was. Yeah. All right, let's go. I'm a Baptist, Cassie. I'm a Baptist. All right, let's go here. Here we go. Steve Lawson interview, which isn't an interview. We'll move past that though. All right. So this is from Clint Archer. So he says, I wanted to avoid this type of post, but regrettably it has become necessary. So something is forced his hand, which we will talk about in a little bit here. Steve Lawson and I became friends during the process in which he was used by the Lord to convince me to be the pastor of the church he planted in Mobile, Alabama. He preached at my installation service and was a continued support and encouragement to me in the unique ministry of being a Calvinistic SBC church in the Deep South, which is something that Steve Lawson had a lot of issues with, with his church, that they didn't want to be Calvinist and he wanted them to be Calvinist, and that forced a lot of issues. But that happens a lot. So, that is the friendship between these two, which tells me that's credibility. Like that he knows this guy, he knows him very well, but that's also, he is like his mentor, right? Like that's what you get out of that. And as anyone knows, anyone who has a mentor in their life, and sometimes those mentors fail, that could really hurt. And also, you might not be the most objective person on the planet. Just saying it. Not saying that this is totally that. But, I think all these things need to be said. So I was just as shocked, appalled, hurt, and bewildered as everyone else when in September of last year, he confessed to an adulterous relationship. To combat the selfish reflex I felt in my heart of feeling indignant, I texted him that I would pray for him. It's a good call. His poignant response contained a word that has echoed in my thoughts every time I thought of him since then. He described his situation as shipwreck. Last week, I preached on 1 Timothy 1:19 about those who have not held their faith with a good conscience and ended up making a shipwreck of their faith. I was moved to call him. All right, so this is a guy who was mentored by Steve Lawson, took over his church. So there's definitely a friendship there, probably more than what you would see from like um, the like stage guys, like even like the G3 guys, or even maybe even Grace Community Church, like maybe a little bit more. It's deeper than that. Like he spent a lot of time with Steve Lawson. And so when all this happened, he's saying like, yeah, he was ticked like everybody else and confused. But rather than lashing out at him, which he definitely could have because he has his phone number, he decided just to text him that he's praying for him. And then I guess what he's saying here is that after he preached this sermon last week, then he felt this need to call him about like, because there was that correlation between shipwrecking. So I guess that's something that Steve told him. I listened with a lump in my throat as he poured out his heart, expressing his deep remorse, himself too, choking up at times. He has wanted to make a public statement for a long time, but has been wisely counseled not to, because anything he said could be misconstrued and used to further hurt the many people affected by his sin. Let's stop there for a sec. That is not wise counsel. Like, wise counsel would be to make a statement. And even if it is misconstrued, like saying something is so much better than saying nothing. Because then what happened was like all these people, like guys, they want to call like channels like mine a gossip, but they're the people out there who are tweeting all the stuff. Okay. Like if you wanted to go and find out information from these guys, all you had to do is go on Twitter and see their tweets. And it's all of his like ministry buddies tweeting vague statements that aren't so vague, like Phil Johnson tweeting a bunch of stuff about the situation. That pastor down in Arizona who sent all of his people stuff and then that got put up online. That was I think he's speaking at some of these conferences now. He's making a name for himself, but the guy who was Costi Henn's pastor down there in Arizona, he started putting stuff out there. There was a bunch of different people, Justin Peters, tons of people started, saying stuff. So like they are the ones who are the sources of information on this stuff, not, internet people. I mean, like even Julie Royce finally got some information the other day, like after talking to his now pastor, or Protestia. They put out information after talking to the elders of TBC and people who were on staff there. Like that's the only sources of information that we had. And the information that they gave wasn't great. And honestly, directly contradicts some of this blog. Somebody's wrong. Like, because he's saying what he's going to argue for in this is total cooperation from Steve Lawson's side toward the church there in Dallas and also toward his family. And that is definitely not the information that was sent out. Not from, this latest article from Julie Roy's. I don't know if she actually wrote the article, but it's on her website. And the source being Steve Lawson's pastor, or at least the pastor of the church he's attending with his brother. And then, the elders there. So those are the people that have given the information, and the information almost directly contradicts some of this. So somebody's wrong. And I think that we can see a little bit of where maybe both parties are. But we'll get to that. But that's what he's saying. He's saying that he felt there was a need to get this information out. And after talking with him, he is remorseful and he was told not to say anything, which again, I think is terrible advice. It reeks of the whole sweep it under the rug mentality, even if that's not what they intended. Even if everybody was like, we want to be, above board, but we just don't think they need to know right now. That works for 2 to 3 weeks with someone who's had such a public, ministry, a very public personality. Like he's out there all the time. People follow him. He has thousands and thousands of followers, people who are invested in his ministry from all around the world. Saying like, oh, he, had this relationship with this young woman and not giving any more information, well, that might give you a month. But here we are in almost February of 2025, and we're just now getting like more concrete details of what actually happened. And now we're getting Steve Lawson's side. That is a huge mistake. Now, whether that's actually the truth, we don't know, because it's the source of information from Clint Archer is Steve Lawson. Now, that would be great if it wasn't the fact that Steve Lawson is the one who did all these things. So, like, that can't be the greatest source of information. You know, it's like there's different sides to these stories, and I feel like the little information that we've gotten so far is the other side of the story from the perspective of the TBC elders in the church, and also probably a little bit of his actual family. So now we're getting Steve Lawson's side, or at least a little bit of information of Steve Lawson's side that we're, being given, I guess. Maybe an interview will happen and we'll get more information, but that's not to say this is the truth. Like, that's to say this is the other side of that story, the other information that wants to be communicated, or that they want to be communicated. So the source of information is not a trusted narrator. Like when storytelling, you have like an untrusted narrator, somebody who is known to lie, somebody who's known to be deceitful. That's kind of what we have with Steve Lawson, unfortunately. So I don't think like this is Steve Lawson's perspective of this, or at least what he's trying to communicate as being his perspective, but this is not the truth of the matter. All right, the truth's somewhere in between. All right, so let's keep on going. After our conversation, he asked those counseling him if they felt it would be prudent to let him speak from the heart in a video interview at our church in Mobile. Weird. All right. Just understand that so much of what happens online is marketing. All right. The things I do on my stuff is marketing. My thumbnails are marketing. The titles are marketing. The title of this thing, an interview with Steve Lawson, that's marketing. It's trying to get you to click. This is odd to me. All right. Like we want to put out a video interview months and months later. Like, just why? So it could get, I don't know, like just put out a statement. Just say, this is what happened. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know why that's so difficult now, but like everyone is acting like it's like the hardest thing in the world to just say, I was wrong. I sinned against God. I sinned against my family. I sinned against my church. And I'm working on rebuilding trust. If that's what like the whole heart is of what's going on in this situation, I don't know why it's so stinking difficult just to say that. Like, to me, putting out a video interview is getting clicks. Even having this on Cripplegate, like, I know you got to get it out somewhere or whatever, but like, I don't know. I would much rather trust someone giving like a picture of a post on Instagram versus like, go to my website and click here, and there's a donate button on the bottom. I'm not saying like that's the point here, but the whole video thing, it just reeks of that kind of stuff to me. And it's just kind of gross, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe they're just really trying to tell everyone everywhere what happened, but it's just kind of odd to me. Just put out a statement saying, I'm sorry. That's it. And what happened? Because so far, what we thought was going on, all right, like what I thought was going on, is that he's in Tennessee with this woman, and that everyone said it was an adulterous relationship. And then further along, they were saying that it was 5 years long. And then further along, they were saying like, oh, it wasn't sexual, but it was. Like, my mind, like, and I don't think I'm alone in this. Like, and I don't think, like, I know I can hear it already. The people who are like supporters of Steve Lawson, or the people that hate Julie Roys or hate people talking online about these things, like, they're going to be like, well, why did you jump to conclusions? Well, because you didn't tell us a dang thing. Like, that's why. Like, why? Well, like if you're super vague about everything, then what am I supposed to do? Just be, like delete all like the files in my head of Steve Lawson, the hours and hours of sermons I've listened to, the books I've read from him, like everything I know about him. I'm just supposed to like just delete that and leave it behind? No, I'm going like, oh my goodness, I think he left his family, right? Like, so don't come at me because you guys didn't communicate properly at all. And this whole like, oh, he's been counseled not to say stuff. No, that's not true. Like, that's not like, and it's wise. No, it isn't. Say something. You don't have to say everything, but you do have to say something. I'm sorry to my wife. You know, like it wasn't a 5-year adulterous relationship. It was something that became that eventually. You know, and you can give the information, but you don't have to tell us everything, but you do have to tell us something. After our conversation, he asked those counseling, blah, 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 if he could do it, an interview at our church in Mobile. The idea is that I would interview him and release the video if and only if his family, his counselors, One Passion's board, and the elders at TBC were all in agreement. This is the first time that you see this idea of his counselors. I want to know what that means. Because at this point, and in this world, I don't trust the counselors in this world. Because we're talking about a guy who was on staff at Masters, a guy who is very much directly tied to ACBC and a line. Not all biblical counselors are this way, okay? But these guys at ACBC, I think they are this way. Like they I don't think they're great. All right. And I've had many videos where I've done that. Go back. You can look up ACBC or even John MacArthur and Underdog Theology. You can find my deep dives into that whole branch of counseling and find out what I think about that. But generally, I just don't think it's good. And so this idea of counselors, I want to know what that means. Is that actual counseling? Is that him going to McDonald's and having coffee with two pastors from other churches who are also very much like, you know, mentored people from him? Like what does that mean? It can mean so many things in this world, and they rely really heavily on that. But yeah, One Passion's board and the elders at TBC were all in agreement. Then this morning, so here's the enemy. Here it is. Like so far, Steve Lawson made mistakes, but, you know, he's a good man and he's contrite. All right. Then this morning, January 24th, 2025, I learned that an acquaintance with inside knowledge, notice how he words things. This is important. Again, everything online is marketing. All right. An acquaintance with inside knowledge. So not a friend, not a family member, not someone who has spiritual authority over him. An acquaintance with inside knowledge had decided to go on the record preemptively without informing Lawson, his family, Trinity Bible Church, or One Passion. The source of the story is a former PCA pastor who was fired by his presbytery and is now the pastor of the church where Lawson is attending while living in Nashville. Okay. This is where I go, what is the point of this article? This article, other than attacking the people who have questions for Lawson. Again, I'm not saying everything is wrong in this article, but here it's very clear that I was going to interview my buddy, and he's very sorry for what he did, and we were going to do an interview, but then this pastor, this podunk pastor, goes and, you know, says a few things to Julie Roy's report and ruined it all. That's what I get out of this. If you go and read the article, which you can find on julieroyce.com, if you read the article, it's not bad. It's a pastor answering basic questions about, you know, someone who's a pretty big deal, and just basically being like, hey, you know, I think maybe, you know, he might be repentant. And, you know, I'm not, one thing was he has zero contact with Trinity Bible Church. He's had zero contact from them, which makes me go like, what? Why? Why not? Like Trinity Bible Church, man, these elders, I don't trust them to do anything. Like if they aren't even contacting like they know Steve Lawson is there, and apparently there's, all this agreement. We'll see that in this. But if there's all this agreement and those elders know that he's at this church and they haven't talked to that pastor, what are they doing? Like to just even to see like, hey, how's he doing? Have you taken him to lunch? Like how are things? We're praying for you. If you need any counsel, we're here for you. And they haven't even talked to this pastor. So obviously there's like this whole bend toward this guy. Now I don't know him. It says that he was fired, like that's the way, who was fired by his presbytery and is now the pastor of the church there. I don't know all the circumstances. I don't know whether he's the greatest pastor ever or not. All right. I'm just saying, like, there's some weird holes in what is being communicated here, and definitely a lot of finger pointing as if it's the worst thing in the world to do this. Look what this guy says. He gained the information in confidence. Like any information that he gave wasn't really information. Like, it's not like he had a bunch of details and told everyone everything. He was like, yeah, he's here. Like, and apparently acknowledging that is, oh, that's a breach. Like as if they like went into a confessional. Are we Roman Catholic now? Like yesterday, he, quote, naively, parentheses, naively. Like this is so condescending. Disgorged. I look past, all right, this is the part where everyone gets mad at me for joking about some things. This is the only way I can do this kind of stuff, okay? I went past the bewildered, typing out bewildered. I looked past it, but disgorged? Are you serious, Clint? The sensitive information to a gossip rag, widely regarded in evangelical circles as self-aggrandizing, biased, and unreliable. That's not true. Most of evangelicalism looks at Julie Royce and goes, that's a credible reporter. Most people. But the Grace Community Church world, the John MacArthur fanboys, they hate her. And this is that. This is 100% that. Calling it a gossip rag, that's exactly what Phil Johnson called it. All right, he is quoting Phil Johnson. Widely regarded in evangelical circles as all of this. That's just not true. He asked not to be named and rather to be referred to as, quote, a reliable source or an anonymous source, but he only thought that to make that request early this morning. I'm sorry that not everyone knows how to like market and knows how to cover all the bases for people who have such public sin. Like this poor pastor, he's just trying to like pastor a guy, he just has like this member, and his brother, who's a big shot in evangelicalism, comes in with all this controversy, and he's just trying to do ministry. He gets contacted. Is it the wisest thing in the world to tell some of that information? I don't know, but he did. And you're just like, let me now just rip him apart for it. Cool. That's great. Very helpful. All right. And then to be like, oh, and he just thought about this morning. Well, yeah, because he doesn't know what to do. His life isn't marketing. His life is shepherding people. So sorry. Like, man. All right. The article had already been posted with his name and picture, exclamation point, which is how you know he's very upset. The other words, the exaggeration didn't have anything to do with it. Update. Since I posted this, I have come to learn that the pastor was genuinely trying to help. Well, why didn't you delete this part then? And had no idea that the person who contacted him for comment worked for a publication known for being antagonistic and biased. So he didn't know what was going on. He just answered some questions because everyone knew that Steve Lawson was at his church. Again, I don't know if that's the wisest thing to tell people, what's going on with members of your church, but like, it's also not the worst thing in the world. And he's acting like it is. But then he's like, update. He was trying to help. Well, then why do you post it this way and still have it this way? The only one I feel bad for is this pastor. All right, to balance the slant of that article, here are the facts as I have learned them from speaking with Lawson and with members of One Passion's board. Lawson's relationship, so again, like in contrast with how he worded it of an acquaintance with insider knowledge, he's saying, I got this from the horse's mouth. I got this from Lawson and from the members of One Passion's board. I don't know who those members are. Some of them are related to Lawson, so maybe that's that. I don't know about the TBC elders. Maybe there is that one guy, I forget, Steinbeck or something like that. All right, Lawson's relationship with the young woman was of acquaintance and then friendship for approximately 5 years, but was not one of a sexual nature until very shortly before it was exposed. All right, that's helpful. That's helpful to know. Now, does that make it, he just messed up there at the end? Come on, guys. Let's not be naive. You want to talk about that pastor there being naive. Let's not be naive. This is a 70-something-year-old having a really close friendship, at the very least, with a 20-something-year-old for 5 years. Now, if she is 29, that's the farthest. I don't know if you knew this, but this is how math works. That's the furthest you could go in your 20s. All right, if she's 29, this means that a 70-something-year-old was having like this really close friendship with a 24-year-old. Because that's how math works. So, does that seem wise? Does that seem innocent? I don't think so, especially in this world. This world, they aren't allowed to hug, y'all. like leave 6 inches for the Holy Spirit. That's that. Talk. I bet you. I don't know for sure. I don't know everything about master's seminary and stuff, but I guarantee you that at the school that he taught, there were probably restrictions for how far men and women had to be at the school. All right. That way you don't have people, all these engaged kids making out all over campus. Okay. So that's how you get rid of that, is to say you can't touch on campus. All right. In that world where everyone is so aware of the other gender and it's very much like antagonistic in a way of like, that person might tempt me. I need to get my, flee from any appearance of sin. And they take that really far. You're saying that a 24-year-old and a 70-something-year-old had like this really tight friendship. And you're saying that was fine. Like that's what, and then friendship. It's not like, he doesn't say like they developed an unhealthy relationship or something like that. He's just taking it all in and saying, and then friendship for approximately 5 years, but was not one of a sexual nature until very shortly before it was exposed. Baloney. That's not how it works. It isn't just, all of a sudden, they accidentally just find themselves. I'm going to be real crass for a second, so maybe turn it off for the kids. Okay. It's not just like, whoops, where'd all my clothes go? Like that's not how it works. Like, you go and there's a progression. There's a progression that leads down that route. Like Proverbs talks about this, guys. Like they quote all this stuff, but there's a progression that happens. And he's trying to be like it just happened right before it got exposed. Baloney. I don't know how long it was. I don't know the details, but I could just say from knowing human nature, that is not accurate. All right. Now, like pushing the limit here, pushing the limit there, pushing the limit a little bit more over there, and however long that was, that's probably how it happened, because that's how usually these things happen. It's not just like, well, we went skinny dipping and all of a sudden, like, come on, we're adults. We could talk about this a little bit. All right. It's just, what is going on here? Like, all right. Now it seems that it wasn't like fully. All right. Let's go with that. People are like, whoa, Dean. I'm a little fiery about this. And just like, how dumb do you think we are? But let's say, okay, they didn't go the full distance, and it was not that all the time. Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. It's still not that they weren't sinning, but not doing that, you can lose a lot of trust with your spouse if you start doing those kinds of things of being overly flirtatious, or not even overly, just flirtatious with the opposite gender and like doing stuff, and pushing the line. You can lose a lot of trust, but everybody knows once that goes further than that, that's where trust gets like really hard to get back. So I'm glad that wasn't an ongoing thing for years and years on that level. Probably makes it a lot easier for his family for sure. But let's not pretend that what was happening was innocent, that it wasn't sinful. All right. After his adultery was discovered, Lawson confessed his sin to the elders of his church and to his family. That is making it seem like it was like very much boom boom, like he was gonna, like he felt so bad right immediately. The dad had to confront him and said, I'm going to talk to everybody about this unless you come clean. That's what happened. That's what we know from all these other people. So it isn't like, oh, well, I definitely sinned and now I need to go and talk to people. His hand was forced. And again, I don't know if Lawson knows like everything about even his own desires and what was going on. A lot of times that takes like years and years looking back when it's us. Like we can convince ourselves that what we're doing in the moment is out of a certain motivation, or like just none of that motivation was going on at all. We can convince ourselves of that. That's why we have other people in our lives to tell us like, hey, I've noticed this, and like you've been going down this route. I'm seeing something here, and like that wasn't happening. And for him to come out and say like, this is where I'm at, this is what happened, it was like this. I don't think, like, again, not a trusted narrator in this situation. Like helpful information to know a little bit, but all right. Lawson confessed his sin to the elders of his church and to his family. He moved to Nashville to temporarily stay with his brother because that is what all involved agreed would be best for the church and family as they all processed the shocking news. Okay. I don't know about that. Like that seems odd to me, but I'll just move on. I don't know the family dynamics, what's going on. Lawson agreed to do so until such time that his family and church felt it was appropriate for him to return to Dallas, though no period was stipulated. So this makes it seem that he was exiled. Like we don't know what to do with you right now. Everyone is upset and you've messed up real bad. So just get out of here for a little while. He didn't have to. Like the guy's rich, okay? He didn't have to go and like, oh no, I can't be at my house. We know how much money he was making at One Passion. Like you can go and you can see all the tax information. The guy's a millionaire. He could have stayed at a hotel and still been there. Like go all the way to Tennessee away from your family during this time. That's bizarre. Like that if that's, I don't know. There's more going on there. I know that. Like he's probably trying to protect people and like who made that decision. I mean, it sounds like he got thrown out. But this whole like playing the church into it is odd. And it gets weirder here in a sec. While in Nashville, he attends church with his brother. He is in daily contact with a few men who have experienced counseling fallen pastors. And again, in that world, that's not great. Like those people might not, like, just because you have experience doesn't mean it's good experience is what I'm trying to say. But, and who were chosen by spiritual leaders to counsel him and report to his elders in One Passion. Well, that is a very different story than what we've been told. What we've been told from all these other people, from these leaked things, from his friends, his ministry friends, is that he ain't talking to anybody. No one knows anything. And, the TBC elders are saying that they can't do church discipline on him because he is unrepentant. That's what they said. All right. This doesn't sound like that. Like this is a very different story. I don't know what the truth is, but it's a very different story. To say, oh, well, they picked out counselors for him and he's meeting with those counselors just like they want him to. If that's true, TBC really, I mean, just add that to the list of things that they have messed up in this situation, because they made him look like he was absolutely 100% non-repentant in any way. Like that it was just like this callousness. That's the way that they talked about it. But that's weird. Lawson has remained in touch with his wife. I don't keep in touch with my wife. Like I talk to her. Like this does not sound like they're talking. Lawson has remained in touch with his wife, so there's been communication, and that's like from the TBC elders. This is how I want you to start to see this. This is story crafting. All right, the TBC guys, like the guy who knows him best. That's how he said, if anyone knows him best, it would be me. That's what they said at that church meeting. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. He said that he would come to his wife if he really was repentant. Someone asked, is he repentant? He said, if like someone who knows him best, I would say he's not repentant, because that would mean coming back to his wife. That is very different than what's being communicated here. All right. Just flat out, those two things, it's mutually exclusive. Like it is like, you can't have them both. All right. Lawson has remained in touch with his wife. He receives spiritual counsel daily from friends and counselors, and he has been back to Dallas to visit his wife. So he has seen her. Though he and the elders of TBC agreed attending there would not be helpful. Once again, this is, what in the world do they think church is? Like, one, they act like these are the guys who rail against, the Stephen verdicts and like the non-denominational super mega church. They rail against that, but then they're doing the same thing. Like they're doing all this marketing. They're doing all these things to cover up, what's actually being communicated, all of that. But also, what the heck do they think church is for? Like, what do they think church discipline is actually for? Just to get someone out? That's not the point. The point isn't just to throw out someone who is a sinner, because if that was the case, then everybody would be chucked out of every single church. Everyone is a sinner. It's so that when there is sin within the church, you deal with it and move forward together. If someone is caught in a sin, right? That's what Paul says. If someone is overtaken by sin, let those who are spiritual restore that person. The point of church discipline isn't to expel sinners. The point of church discipline is to restore Christians. It's restoration. How can you have that if you exile them? Now, I get it. There's family dynamics. Maybe the kids, the wife, other people. I don't know. I don't want to blame anybody. But just maybe they don't want him around. They want to heal on their own. But this idea of they're like TBC is like, oh, he needs to go away. Like he's just a distraction right now. Well, then you aren't doing church. Because the whole point of church is that when there is sin, yes, it's uncovered, it's made known to the church, it's repented of, and you move forward together. Like it isn't just to let's break off that limb and throw it away. It's to restore that limb. It's a Band-Aid. That's really what it is. But they're acting so weird about it. All right. So while in Nashville, all that stuff. So it's not helpful for him to attend his church. He is back in Nashville for the time being. All right. Lawson is fully aware that he is permanently disqualified from ministry and is not under any illusion that he could ever be restored to a teaching position or ministry capacity that requires the qualifications of an elder. Okay. At this point, I don't know what they even mean by that, because they were having him act like he was an elder. They kind of misled their own congregation on like what his role was and like whether he was a teaching pastor or not. They kind of like this is so just bizarre. A lot of this is bizarre. This whole story has been bizarre for months, but it's just what are you doing here? Like you're saying like, "Oh, don't worry guys, he's not going to get back in the pulpit anywhere that requires the qualifications of an elder." Where is that? Because the qualifications for being an elder are for elders. Like that's qualifications of an elder. That's what it's for elders. Like what are you doing? Like, but is that to say like, oh, well, he could be, involved at a seminary again, or he could be an evangelist again. Like that's the door is open for that stuff. But like, or at least I don't know if that was trying to be like, don't worry, anything that's like a teaching, preaching thing is covered. Well, based off of the ecclesiology that they've shown so far, I don't like that. That is not communicated effectively here, because to me, this feels more like a caveat of like, he can never be a pastor again, but he returned cash advances for book contracts he will no longer publish. This again, that's the law. This is being listed as like these merit badges that he's achieved. But that's what the law is. Like if you don't write the book, you got to return the advancement. So he is considering avenues for secular employment. Man, to be in a world where you lose your job and you can be gone for months and months and be traveling around and then be like, I'm starting to think about it. That's a world, man. Millions of dollars here. Despite his initial hesitancy to volunteer details of his sin, so there it is. So he didn't want to, like he was forced to. That's what that means. He soon repented of that after he was forced to, and offered a full and detailed confession to his elders and family. That's good. He has been fully cooperative with the elders at TBC. Not according to them. The board of One Passion, the appointed counselors, and his family's wishes for, quote, space. There it is. So he got kicked out. His wife doesn't want him there, right? Like, or at least for a period of time. It's not to say, like, it's so weird to talk about, but it's not to say there won't be a future there. But for right now, it seems like we want you gone. To process the hurt he caused them. He has not resisted any counsel that has been offered. Okay. Any allegations of being unrepentant or of being under church discipline for unrepentance is unfounded. Well, then talk to the people at TBC. Like they've been the ones who have been so weird about this. All right. To be clear, the reason Lawson is not under church discipline by TBC or the church he is attending is not just because he isn't a member, as implied by the pastor who spoke to the press. All right. Again, throwing this pastor under the bus. What are you talking about? Like, you don't know this pastor, first off. That's become very clear from this because you've been accusing him of all different things throughout this article. But also, he isn't a member like at this church. So that part could be true. Like, what is this? I don't know, man. I don't know this guy, but this is so, I love my buddy. That's what this is. But because he is not in a state of unrepentance, as per Matthew 18:15 through 18, so he's not doing those things. Rather, the repentance of this type of sin takes time to be fully convincing to observers. Well, you got to be in the same church for them to observe it. Right? The TBC elders did the right thing to rebuke him publicly and remove him from teaching duties. I agree. What they failed in was communicating that. All right, from which he willingly resigned anyway. Well, that's how firing works. like, you can fire or you could resign. You resign. Oh, what? As per 1 Timothy 5. But they are also under no obligation to remain but they are also under no obligation to maintain church discipline since he has not refused to repent. Again, they don't know what church discipline is. They don't know. This world that, fancies itself as being like, we are the ones who care about ecclesiology. The church matters. The government is tyrannical. Open the church. The church matters. They don't know what church discipline is because the whole point is restoration. So like that's the goal. So how about you work on the goal? Not just, oh, well, he said he was sorry and now he's gone. So we don't have to move forward with this at all. It's convenient for you. Their role in the process of his repentance is currently to oversee and support those counselors who are experienced in dealing with this extraordinary intensity of a public figure's disqualification from ministry. Sorry. I'm starting something. I wanted to say getting over it, but that's too optimistic. I'm in the middle of something. The lack of a personal statement of repentance and remorse made publicly is entirely because Lawson's counselors have felt it premature to issue one. Maybe they know something we don't. Okay. Was there sin? Was he a public person? Then maybe there should be like some public acknowledgement of that. Again, no one is saying, give us all the details. But give us some details, like just some. We paid for those books. We listened to those sermons. Like we supported this ministry. We'd like to know what's going on, not just completely turning off the radio, just absolutely silent. These people, all right. Or maybe they are erring on the side of the proof is in the pudding. Again, putting out a statement isn't to say this is the last thing that we will ever say on the matter, and now it's concrete, and if it ever changes, we can't say anything. Like it's a blog post. You can write a blog post, and then there's this other thing, like if you go to the top, it says like create new. Like you could just start another blog post, I don't know why this is difficult. Frankly, Lawson is still radioactive. That's true. And any institution, church, ministry, seminary, etc., that touches him risks their reputation being contaminated further. No, if they're dealing with him, like to be like, are you hiring him? Like, yeah, you might have some issues with people, but like, are you counseling him? No one's mad about that. With today's new and unfortunate development, in other words, this pastor is just saying, hey, he goes to my church. It may prove even more necessary for him to break his silence. Victim. Steve Lawson is not a victim. All right? He's not the victim in this story. He's making it like, oh, this happened to him. Oh, you mean that 4 months after he did the thing, someone actually got some information about that? Oh no, poor him. What? If his counselors agree, I have offered to interview him, not on behalf of any institution or church, but just as a friend and as one of many, many younger men in ministry who looked up to him and who feel like we are owed some sort of explanation. I agree with him on that. I suppose I am not entitled to anything, but I feel like a personal statement would go a long way in bringing closure to an experience that left me reeling. And I think I speak for many others. That is correct. You do in that regard. If the interview is in writing, I will release it here on the Cripplegate. Stay tuned, folks. And if it is recorded, I will post the audio and video on the Cage Free Theology podcast and YouTube channel. Subscribe. So what do we do with this? I do think that it would be completely unfair to look at this and say that Steve Lawson, has no humanity like that. So that's the kind of way that it was described, like that he left his family, that he's gone, that he's, over here in Tennessee, is there the relationship over with that woman? We don't know, that's the way everything has been painted. And I do get from this, like he's sorrowful. That's a good thing. It's a good thing to know. It is a good thing to know that he has been told not to say things and that he is listening to other people who have said that. Now, That being said, those people are wrong. Like flat out wrong. Like you should say something. You have a public ministry. You failed in a pretty epic way. Like everybody knows, you should just come out and say something. And blaming them and being like, well, they're the reason why I haven't said anything. Well, you listen to those people. So that's kind of on you. But I do think that there's a lot of misinformation between these two different ones. And again, I'm not here to say, oh, it's the TBC guys who are right and this guy's wrong. I'm just pointing out the inconsistencies between these two stories. These two narratives, they do not match up. And this one I would look at with a little bit more. I just don't take this as completely true, even more than the TBC elders. And not that I'm doing that with theirs. But this is from Steve Lawson. And, you know, when you mess up, you might try to, you know, paint it a little bit better than it seems, you know, just try to be like, this is what I was really thinking. And that's not really, but that's the narrative you've constructed for yourself so that you can get out of some of the issues related to that. There's blame here that I'm seeing. I don't know why Owen Strachan went on Twitter and said, like, he tweeted some stuff about, oh, the wife is sticking with him, and like people were happy about that. Like, it seems that way, but also there's a lot of blaming her in this. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but when I read this, seems like she threw him out. Like, it seems like kind of like that's why he's here. Well, he could have stayed somewhere. I'm pretty sure the guy with millions of dollars could have figured it out and, you know, been in a motel for a couple months, or you know, some, I don't know, Airbnb. He's probably pretty good with his cell phone. So there's that. So that's what I think about this. Is this like now we know the truth of it? No, but it's just more confusion. And which tells me no one knows what happened. Like, these guys don't know. This Clint Archer guy doesn't know. The pastor that is currently trying to shepherd Lawson doesn't know. Nobody knows except for Lawson. And the reason why people don't know is because of Lawson. If he wanted everyone to know everything, they would know everything. He's very good at communication. Personally. Like, obviously, he's made a career out of it. He's very good at communication. So if he wanted to tell people, the guy who literally made an entire career off of being a preacher, speaker, and the details of speaking and how to communicate and what you should wear when you communicate and fountain pens that you should use when you're working on that stuff for communication, you know, like that guy could figure it out. So I don't think this is an answer to anything. I just think it's more confusion, but I think that there is some movement toward the middle between these two accounts. That is the truth of what's going on. This is not the truth. I do not believe it. I don't believe what the TBC elders have said is the full truth. I think that the truth is somewhere in between. But I would say it's probably further that way toward the Dallas guys than it is what this is. But that's just my gut. But these are things that everyone is talking about, and I want to know your opinion. So hop into the chat. We got a couple minutes here. 156 people watching. I haven't seen the likes at all. 53 likes, and we got a dislike. So probably that guy who wasn't happy. All right, let's go back up and let's read some of your guys' thoughts. But I want to know, after you've read through the article with me, what do you think? What do we do with this? Again, I'm not the source of truth on all of this. This is me just kind of reacting to this. But I would like to know your thoughts. All right, let's go. Sevens Heavenly. Sheavenly. Just because he's repentant doesn't mean his wife has to take him back. True. It doesn't mean his wife will. And like, again, I want us to stay away from really any talk about her, because we have no idea what that lady is dealing with. We don't know, because again, we don't have the information. What I won't do and what I won't take from anybody here on this channel, not that anyone here in the chat would, but there are people who would. We will not blame Mrs. Lawson for anything. All right, we don't have any of the details. And so for like, if she kicked him out of the house, good for her. Right? Like, if it is an affair, biblically, she has grounds for divorce. So I'm not going to blame her for any of this. And what I get from this article is like, not like she's the worst, but there is a little bit of blame. And I will not entertain that at all. Let's see. Mark says, to be fair, in touch with his wife can mean he is separated and they are in contact, slowly rebuilding trust. But the phrasing is indeed awkward and comes across as spin. That's 100% what I meant. Like, I fully agree with you. I think that's exactly what it means and what it was interpreted as. Brandon says, we are getting vague, possibly true to some degree, updates about one person. His wife, the young girl, the elders, and so many others. We have no clue what is happening. True. Some of it we don't need to know. But like he is, let's make sure that we remember, he's the public person. All right. He's the one who he owes his followers. All right. His wife doesn't owe Lawson's followers. The elders, they used him. That's pretty clear at this point. They used him to build that church. So they do. But his family, no. Anne says, yeah, but if the woman is still there and if her dad is still angry and Lawson's wife, etc., it may not be good for him to come back. Sin hurts people and all the people are important. Agreed. I would agree with that. But to be out of the state, I don't think is helpful. That's just my opinion. That's, you can add in pastoral experience into that. I just don't see how that's helpful. Being that far removed from the situation, that doesn't mean they have daily meetings, or, all of that. From what I remember, this guy or the woman and the dad don't go to Lawson's church. So that, I don't think that's the reason why he's not at the church. But family wise, that could be a part of it for sure. KW says, good point. Restoration is the goal. 100%. And these guys, like, they kind of just show their cards that they don't actually know what church discipline is. I think it's just their way of, getting people off of the membership rolls. Steve could ever be a pastor? I would say never, right? Like, that's what you're trying to say. And I would agree with that. In his denomination, are the pastors members of the local church? In many, the pastor is actually a member of the local church, but is tied to the larger denomination. In many, the pastor is actually a member of the local church, but is tied to the larger denomination. Yeah. It's always different depending on where you're at. Steve Lawson is Baptistic. The TBC is Baptistic. It is non-denominational, I believe. But just like Grace Community Church, it is Baptistic. They have a plurality of elders. They all would say that an elder needs to be qualified, and that qualification is apt to teach. Anyone who would teach, except for Steve Lawson, apparently, would be an elder, and that they would need to be a member of the church. So in that world that he's in, very much so, it is, you must be a member of the church to be one of their pastors. So it's shocking to see this stuff. Now, the way that they've gotten out of that is to call him a lead preacher. But jury's out whether the church there even knew that. I've heard from some that have said that they thought he was their pastor. So I don't know if that was purposeful or not, or whether it was like a convenient thing for them not to explain that distinction that they would make. But yeah, I've heard from people that have said that they thought Steve Lawson was their pastor. I don't know. I feel like the dad needs to speak. Yeah, that would be helpful. But in this world, like, I just don't see that probably happening. Guys, he went to Lawson himself because, again, like, I understand how this world works because it's the fundy world. It is. And I'm from fundy world. And so I know how that works. When you have an issue, you take it to that person. right? It's almost like this like honor thing. Like you have sinned, so we go to you as a person. Well, when it's someone who's an elder, you go to the elders. You go to the elders when it's something like this. You don't go to Lawson. Now, it's the heat of the moment. We don't know. Maybe it was he just saw him and was like, I'm talking to him. I don't know. I'm not going to judge on that. But I will say that kind of tells me that there's probably something to the fact that he has not said anything and probably won't. And it's not to say that he doesn't care about his daughter or anything like that. Don't construe any of that. It's probably just part of like that fundy world of, trusting the elders, trusting leadership, and like going to him and saying, you need to tell them, I think it's probably that. I didn't know why Grace had him when he wasn't a member. They didn't check him out teaching at the Masters. Well, apparently him and MacArthur are good friends. So I don't know how don't know this stuff. Now, I did see someone on Twitter, maybe it was Shawnee, it was someone I follow on Twitter, put a video of Austin Duncan talking about how Lawson is like the new version of George Whitefield, which is way too high of praise. But also just kind of says like, what he's doing, like that he's not a pastor, that he's like an evangelist. Most of these guys preach a loveless obedience. Why are we surprised that they don't understand relationships? I mean, you're not wrong. Pam says churches and organizations that tend toward legalism have a really hard time knowing what to do with stuff like this. They generally freeze or bluster or quietly hide it under the rug. 100%. 100%. And again, like to all the fundies out there who would be like, we don't do that. We're saying generally, okay? Generally, this stuff is harder for fundies to deal with. It's not to say other different, perspectives, denominations, branches of churches, like that they get it right every single time. But I've seen that. It's hard. It's hard for them. I think Grace Church is a man's church. Probably. Yeah. It's much easier. Why would he need secular employment at his age and financial status? Well, if somebody gets half of everything, you're going to have to work. Hey, underdogs. What's up, dude? I hope you're doing well today, Jer. This is bizarre. Are the TBC elders going to take any responsibility? I don't think so. Guys, I trust those guys as far as I could throw them. Like, not that my opinion really matters, but just like as someone from the outside looking in, I don't trust those guys at all. So like for me, I'm just going like, I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, what they're trying to do. I don't know this Clint Archer guy, but there's a lot of stuff here that kind of says, relationship over facts to me. Like that's the vibe that I get. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's not to say that the TBC guys are doing it right. Permanently disqualified is enough, right? They should be. So honest question. If you are the pastor of a church and you have a family where the husband cheats, what do you do with that family in regards to church attendance if the couple are separated? Well, it depends. And I get what you're saying. Every situation is going to be different. That's not a cop-out, but that's just the way people are. Like every situation is going to be different. So let's say that, it's the exact same thing. Like husband cheats on wife. Wife wants him gone. Let's just say that's how it is. All right. And they're separated, but the husband is repentant, like actually repentant. Not I'm putting out statements to try to make it seem I'm repentant, but actually repentant. Then you would have to work on something. You would have to talk to them and say, hey, is there a way that we could do this to where he can still be part of the church? If this is, because this, so far from what we know, it isn't a situation of I want him gone forever. It's a period of time. But I could tell you one thing, even if it meant like this husband was going to a different church, if I'm the pastor, I'm still working with that guy. There's this thing called Zoom. Like, I don't know if the TBC guys have figured that thing out, but there's this thing called Zoom and you can still counsel people. Like you might not be able to walk, and know everything because we all know things online are very different. People could put up appearances and you're not there in their daily life. You can't see, what's going on except for, the box that you see here. But I'm not saying like, oh, we can't do church discipline. Like I can work on restoration from that point, and at least from everything I've seen, it does seem like Mrs. Lawson would take him back if there's real repentance. Like that's like from the TBC elders, the things that they've said, it seems that way. So if there's real repentance, then you work on that. You continue to work on that. You don't just walk away because you're in Tennessee now. If you're still a member, which they said that he was, then you still work on it. Right. That doesn't mean that you have to, like, they have to see each other at church every Sunday, if that's what you're trying to say. But that's not the situation here either. All right. Paul says, the one thing that strikes me the most about the Cripplegate article is the almost complete absence of any mention of the young woman and what she's going through. This is a massive, massive red flag. Yeah. I have two minds about that. The one is obviously curiosity of like, what is going on? Is there something more to that? And who's taking care of her? But also, like, is that for her protection? Like, is that like she's young? Obviously, like, let's be real. Lawson is 70 something years old. There's no way he's not the like initiator of this thing. So if that's the case, is it just protection for her? Because I could agree with that. And again, she's not the public person. Like, we don't have to know everything about her, but the absence of that in this conversation, like, completely is odd for sure. This whole write-up feels like damage control. Agreed. I think, but again, I am willing to say, like, I think that there is some humanity here of like, I would, the guy that I saw on stage, that's why when like the stuff came out that he hasn't talked to his wife, I was so shocked of just like, what? That is that I can't even fathom that from the man that I knew of as Steve Lawson. So to now have this part of the information at least helps me to understand, like, it seems like he's a real person. Obviously, huge sin. He needs to be held accountable. All that stuff is true. But it does seem like there's sorrow, and sorrow is good. Sorrow is good. It isn't the full thing. Like, it isn't the full thing of repentance, but sorrow is great. It's a good first step. So I'm glad to at least see that. Let's go down. Mrs. Creel. Thank you, Dean. Steve Lawson is not a victim. Yeah. It's weird to paint him like that. Like, hey, the guy that we all know did the thing, now things are being talked about with it 4 months later. He's very lucky that he got 4 months. Like, that's kind of insane. Closure should not be expected for a long time. Agreed. My husband did this early on in our marriage. He was not caught, but repented and confessed on his own. He was fully transparent and put in works to get me back. True repentance is evident, not like Lawson. Well, I'm sorry that happened within your marriage, but I am glad to hear that, you guys were able to see genuine repentance and move forward together. It's not easy, and I'm sure there are even days when it's not easy. But I'm glad to hear that part of it. Worldly sorrow or godly sorrow. I don't know his heart, like, any sorrow is good. I don't, even worldly sorrow, I don't know exactly what that means. I guess that's to say, like, just feeling bad for yourself or feeling bad because you sinned. I guess that's probably the distinction you're trying to make, but I don't know, because I don't know the guy. Radioactive Lawson is the Chernobyl of the Reformed community. Yeah. Exercise grace in our hearts and judge how you want to be judged on this. The process may not be perfect, but remember how we were before we became Christian. I get what you're trying to say. But let's remember, not every Christian has thousands and thousands of followers and has gained millions of dollars over the topic of expository preaching, and had so many people invest in their ministry and then go radio silent after they find out about an affair. Like, it's not to say like, oh, he's the worst person ever, but that's pretty stinking bad. And I think it's fair for us as Christians to be like, that is bad. And like, can we talk about how weird it is? All this conversation around it, like from TBC, from even this now, like the way that people have talked about it. Guys, this story would have been over like 2 weeks after if it was just Lawson putting out a statement saying, I'm very sorry over my sin. And, I am working to restore my relationship with my family. And I'm going through the process of church discipline. And I am fully, working with everyone. Like, if there was a statement like that right after, I think all of us would have been like, wow, that's shocking. But then we would have been done with it, because what's going on. Like, you don't have to know all the details, but oh, there was an affair, and now he's not in ministry, and he's, like he sinned, and he is trying to show public repentance over that sin and work on things with his family, which is the most important thing. And I think we all would have all been like, that's great. Let's move on, but this weird shadiness that everyone has had about it is probably the reason why people are still so interested, because we actually cared about Lawson. And I think it would be unfair to just be like, well, just trust them and move on, because they haven't said anything. He's been told not to say anything because the powers and organizations that are protecting themselves. Yeah. That's something I probably like went right over. Where does he talk a little bit more about like he has not said anything? Let's see. There's something here. Well, he talks about how like they don't want him to talk because it might like misconstrue things and make it more difficult for people. And the way that they put it kind of made it seem to me that it was also like the people around his ministry. So I don't think you're wrong there. Let's go down a little while, and we'll go to Elizabeth. The article seems like the guy is trying to get publicity for his podcast. I don't think that's the purpose of it, but I find some of those little marketing tricks to be a little on the nose, and I think it's worth pointing out. Family restoration should be a priority even over ministry restoration. I completely agree, and ministry restoration should never happen. Like, being restored doesn't mean you get everything back the way it was. Like, some things are done, Yeah, I don't know. They don't know. They're Baptistic, but I don't think they have an actual denomination. So he cannot be disciplined at any higher body than the elders of TBC. 100%. That's what they would agree with. And honestly, it's what I would agree with as a Baptist, is that it's about that local church. My Presby buddies would disagree. I hear you. I understand. Yeah. Let's see. Andy says, if Steve Lawson put out the statement now the way you expected, is it too late now because of how they delayed the whole process? No, I don't think it would be. I think that would also need to be discussed. But I don't think it's too late. Like it would probably still linger. It wouldn't be the same way. Like, it wouldn't end all conversation. Like it probably would have had he just done that earlier. If that's the truth, if that's the truth, that he is repentant and that him and his wife are working on restoration and that he is, fully on board with everybody involved, and that's the truth of everything, and has been the truth, it's been a long time in between. Things could have changed, right? It's been a long time to go back and forth and change minds about different things. So if that was the truth early on, I think it would have ended all conversation. Like we would just be like, all right, moving on. We don't need to talk about it anymore. That sucks that happened with Lawson, but we're moving on. It's the shadiness and everything. So that would need to be talked about, but I think it would be way more helpful to do it. I still think he should do it. But it probably won't end all conversation because of how they've been. Right? It's weird. She was 24 then. She was 24 and he was 70. Like that's it's not a usual friendship, especially in that world. Like I really want you guys to understand that. In that world, like you might be like, well, you have friends and they're the opposite sex and it's fine. In that world, it's not looked at like that. It's not normal. Not at all. And then the age difference, definitely not normal. Like, so there's more going on there. Oh yeah, as we know, all men love to talk to women for 5 years. Bro's a simp if he destroyed his life for the privilege to talk to a woman. I don't know, Gen Z talk. I don't know, man. I don't know what that means. Moving on. Just a side note. There are women out there that go after these kind of men and seduce them. Not saying that's what happened here. And he would still be accountable if she did, but she's a grown woman. Yeah. I'll be real honest with you. I'm not sure where I fall on that. Like, because I get it. Believe me, I get it. People are accountable for their own actions. And I do think that there is within this idea of like, once there is a victim, we act as though the victim is completely innocent. And that's not always true. In this situation, I don't know. Because there's also been people saying like, he's known her all her life, like that the dad was like a big supporter of the ministry. That's been out there. So I don't know what kind of influence he's had over her. I don't know whether they just met, at the college there. It seems like it was at Masters and then, developed whatever kind of relationship after. I just don't know because I don't have the information and I'm not going to, make a judgment call without information, especially on that. So for me, like, I think it's odd that she's not being talked about at all in some of these statements. But as far as like what we need to know about her, I don't think that the public needs to know any more about her. Other than to say what Lawson's motivations were. I don't need to know whether she was like completely twisted by him or whatever. That's for her counselors, her church, her, family to know. She's not a public person. I don't need to know that stuff. What I do need to know is like, what was Lawson doing? What was Lawson trying to do? Like he's the public person. But I don't I get what you're saying about like, ownership over someone's actions and we all sin. And, so we need to take ownership for that personal sin. But I don't have enough information to say like what I think about her and that, but because there's all different information out there. I'm going to go down. Oh, Yolandi. What's up? The thing is the young lady didn't consider the wife and children either, and women should have each other's backs rather than backstab like that, to be honest. You're not wrong. How bad must the situation be that a statement of repentance could be misconstrued? What possibly could be misconstrued? I don't know, but silence is way worse. Like, I just don't even get it. Like, these guys, they're not idiots. Like, it's like marketing. It is much better to get your message out, right? And I feel like what we're seeing here from Clint is on behalf of Lawson, and Lawson trying to be like, I want to say things because he gets it. He knows he needs to say something. And these people are saying it could be misconstrued. Like, just say sorry. If it's sorry, I sinned, I'm working on it, and not like, oh, this is why I sinned and it's not that bad. And, you know, I'll be back in a pulpit soon, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, as we see sometimes, then I think we could be okay with it. Hope he is saved. Hope he repents, but I'm praying for his sweet wife and family. If he is repentant believer, then maybe he can sit quietly in a pew the remainder of his life. Right? And what I will say, like from this stuff, is I will never understand these guys who are like so desperate to get back in the pulpit. Like it's like they gotta, like Mark Driscoll. Like it's like they have to be in a pulpit. Like God doesn't need you, first off. But also, like, what's wrong with just being a normal Christian? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, you don't think there's anything wrong for the people you're preaching to be normal Christians who just are disciple and live, you know, good, healthy, godly lives and just go to church and they're involved and like that. Why do you have to? Like, why do you have to make up some story of God told me I needed to go and marry this woman and plant churches and preach the gospel? Like, it's a lie. That's a lie. Like, like I just don't understand. Like, they have such a disdain for just being a normal Christian, and I don't understand it. Grant says, I just got in here. Going to go back and watch after the stream is over. As a guy who loved Lawson and his numerous podcasts, the lack of a public statement repentance from him has hurt just as bad. Agreed. It has been far more damaging, I think. Especially with people being like, you know, there's like, he might not be talking. What? All right. I'll be real honest and say, here's my thoughts of why we haven't had a statement. I think things have changed. I think that what's being communicated now is not the same thing that has been happening the last 4 months. I think that people have changed their minds. I think people have gone back and forth. I think that, you know, what is now being communicated as he is repentant, I don't think that's been the case the entire time. You know, I don't think, like, given what TBC said, I don't think that's the whole truth, that he has always been repentant. I just don't buy that. It doesn't make sense for the timeline. I think that, like, I don't know, outside of that, I'm not going to speculate on what else has changed, but I just think things have changed. Situations have changed. People's opinions about what's going on has changed. And that's why we haven't had any information. And now there seems to be this concrete, here's the narrative. And I think now we'll get information. But is that information going to be accurate? Only the Lord knows, I guess. Let's see. None of us will be preachers in heaven. Underdog Theology. Yeah, very true. Dr. Ed. Let's see. Yes, God doesn't need them. These pastors aren't a special class of human, right? Like, and also that's like my thing against multi-site churches too. Like, why are you so arrogant to think it's only you that should be on a screen? Like, don't you trust those other guys who have callings in their life? If you want to use that word calling, but like, they're qualified as elders. So like, let them be elders, like let them go plant churches. Like this arrogance of, it has to be me. I have to be the one who's preaching. I have to be the one on the platform. Why don't you just trust other people to do it? Like, why don't you trust them? That's my question. All right. That's the end of the stream for today. 115 people watching and 67 likes. What can you do? All right. Thanks for hanging out with me and kind of going through this, and I hope that it was helpful. And I think it's healthy to talk about these things, not in a way that we're gossiping and speculating about everything, but in a way that we can just be like, what is the truth here? Like, because these things are getting communicated. We're not reading text messages from people. It's public statements, public posts. Like, I think it's fair for us to say, what does this mean? What's being talked about here with these public things? But anyways, I will see you guys in the next one. Maybe later in the week. We'll see. Bye.